SCNR.com, the reason why I asked. Whoopi Goldberg claims Trump will put people in camps.
They're in camps right now. We
so-
see the videos, right?
And
it's cages under Trump. When it's Obama, it's a lovely facility that happens to be a cage, but we won't call it that.
Exactly. And so this is what they're priming us for. We need mass deportation.
Yeah.
We have 10,000 plus people per day illegally entering the country. AOC says just give them papers. That's not gonna solve the problems of the economic crises.
There's more illegals coming into the country on an annual basis than there are American children being born here.
Right. What they're prepping us for with these statements from Whoopi Goldberg is that when Donald Trump does begin the process of, I would just say, typical deportation processes, they are going to produce videos and photos, and they're going to claim he's Hitler, and it's happening, and they're going to use this as propaganda to incite violence.
Yeah, AOC crying at the border wall, of course, but because they've done that. The projection is already happening. Everyone's a fascist except for when they're functioning like fascists. And you've seen it. There's no limit to what the Democrat Party will do to retain power. We've been watching that for the last few years. I mean, it's scary stuff. But yes, they are definitely doing. I'm surprised anyone can actually listen to The View at this point with a straight face.
Who are the people who still do?
I honestly, I don't know. It's sort of interesting. I did, when my first book, Triggered, came out, they had me on The View, and it was, I think it was like the 5,000th episode of The View. And, so, they're going a little bit. I actually got, after a while, you fight back and whatever. I actually turned the audience, and Whoopi was there MFing the audience in the commercial break. It was sort of amazing. I wish we could get the footage of that. They'll never allow that to get out there. But it was sort of like they're used to people going on these shows, and they're so desperate to get a little bit of airtime because they're selling their book or whatever bullshit their product they got or whatever it may be. I was there for a book thing. They didn't even ask me about my book. I figured if they're going to have me on there, at least you have the courtesy of that. But it was just an attack session. So then when I sort of went after Whoopi for the, allowing, pedophile Roman Polanski and justifying that, and Joy Behar for blackface, and it was, I just sort of had fun because I just said, what, if this goes really wrong, I just Googled, what are the dumbest things ever said on The View? And it's like, there was a long list, but there was some pretty obvious ones. And, they lost their whole audience, but they still have this sort of, they must have some sort of capture, probably, white suburban virtue signaling housewives that they're able to manipulate with their nonsense because, they're correcting themselves all the time, but, it doesn't matter. They get the hit out there. The media picks it up. It's pushed very effectively through social media as though it's the gospel as opposed to nonsense. There's no question that's what they're doing.
Wasn't it Kelly Osbourne that came out and said on The View specifically that we need all these immigrants here because they're going to be cleaning our toilet?
Yeah, and I quote, Donald Trump, who's going to scrub your toilet if they're not here? And everyone else was like, whoa. She's like, no, this is what I mean, but that's the problem. They don't get it.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that there's value to building a wall now again?
Listen,
a big graphene
Joe
wall.
Joe Biden is selling the wall off.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
We need a nice, strong
we paid
wall.
for it. We then sell off the components rather than taking, literally, they could have just completed it in the areas that it mattered. I mean, it was clearly effective. You saw the numbers, but they didn't want to complete it. So instead, they paid for the material. Now they're selling off the remaining materials so that you have to buy it again if and when someone else ever takes office. Like, there's literally no... It's like Wuhan lab leak theory. Like, of course it came from the lab. Like, of course this is intentional from them. Of course they want unfettered access to people who are going to be dependent and who will ultimately vote Democrat. Like, they offer nothing else if you're not a dependent at this point.
I get nervous about the deportation stuff because logically it makes sense. But realistically, I see the horror of people with their cell phones recording their mother screaming as she's being pulled out of her living room. And then every day that kind of stuff on social media getting played on NBC and
Now imagine this. Now imagine a video of a woman crying and screaming as she's being pulled from a bank vault carrying a bunch of cash.
Yeah.
We don't look at that crime being committed and go, oh, that poor woman.
Or the seventh time
Democrats
deported
do.
guy that raped women with reckless abandon, or drove drunk for the 5th time in the United States and killed someone's son, or smuggling fentanyl across the border time and time again, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans.
There's a video of a man being arrested in the subway, and the cops are roughing him up, not really hitting him or anything, but they're grabbing his arm, they're pulling it, and he's resisting. And there's all these comments on Twitter, they're like, why are the cops doing this? This man, he didn't even do anything. He was fighting cops.
Yeah.
He jumped the turnstile. They said, stop, we're going to give you a ticket. He fought with the cops. They fought back and arrested him. Yes, that's how you enforce laws.
That's victim crime. This is victimless crime, which is part of what makes deportation challenging. Like these,
It's not victimless.
Well,
it is not victimless.
They're technically
No, it
attacking everyone by displacing us, but
Well,
realistically,
you have E-Verify. You make it. You create incentives where it's harder for them to do that. Maybe they honestly, you probably have a lot of people self-deporting because if they're not able to take advantage of the systems, if we're not just abjectly writing them checks and giving them phones and telling them, hey, here's a phone, here's a couple $1,000 a month, and why don't you see us in 2037 for your court date? There are things you can do that don't make it so simple where the American taxpayer isn't footing the bill in perpetuity.
You've got these people hiring human traffickers, actual human traffickers.
or smugglers.
Not smugglers, traffickers.
Yeah.
There are traffickers who kidnap kids, who rape them, drag them across the border, and these are the same people that the other illegal immigrants will go to and pay.
Yeah.
And so we hear these horrifying stories that these smugglers, let's say the lighter version of the coyotes, they overwhelmingly rape young girls as they do this. It's not a victimless crime. This should not be allowed to continue. Now,
Like 40%.
It's an
like
insane
it's
number.
not like, there's occasionally it happens, and I know they went after my father a lot when he said it, but that's the reality. I had Tom Homan, a former head of ICE, on my Triggered podcast like 2 weeks ago, and he's talking about, the stories that these guys could tell. If you could show those videos, if you could show those stories to the American public, you'd be building a wall in about 3 seconds if people understood the reality of what's actually going on down there.
I've done some reporting on the ground of the refugee crisis that was spurred on by a lot of the caravans that ended up in Tijuana. And there was a lot of problems, not just when it came to sanitation, not just when it came to a lot of the diseases and viruses that were being spread everywhere, but specifically with assaults on women and children, specifically to the point where they needed an entire other area to house people and to put people in because of the huge amounts of violations that were happening against women, that were happening against children. And when you look at a large number of the people coming through, it's fighting age males. It's males that, of course, are in the peak of their age. They're coming here to this country, and this is something that sadly we don't hear talked about at all because there's a big censorship effort trying to deny us this reality. But a lot of these people are lied to. They're told, hey, we're going to give you all this stuff. There's all these opportunities. Just come on here. Everything's going to be amazing and great for you. And for a lot of them, it's not. And it's not just hurting Americans, but it's also hurting them as well. As, of course, a lot of multinational corporations also take advantage of them. They put them in, of course, laborious situations where they don't have to pay them like they would an American. And they're the ones also being taken advantage of. And from a humanitarian perspective, we have to understand here, I understand what Ian is trying to convey, but I think just stopping the incentivizing of this larger program from moving forward, just stop funneling it, stop giving it money, that would solve a lot of the problems. Go after the corporations hiring these people, go after all these incentives, and then you won't need to force deport people. People won't leave because the people will naturally leave.
But Donald Trump did this.
Yeah. Like, by the way,
Famously went after several meat processing plants. We've talked about it quite a bit.
we've seen this done. It's not, and that's sort of the thing about my father running right now, right? Like, he did all of the things he said he was, like, we know we can do this. Them pretending like, oh, it's impossible. We just can't do it. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we had these numbers down. I mean, the amount of, you talk about the fighting age males, but they're showing up with young girls that clearly aren't their children, and they won't do the DNA test anymore because it doesn't matter. And they're just like, well, we just got to push it through. It's too much to handle. I mean, we are enabling a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. And, like, those same Hollywood elites are just fine with that. Maybe, listen, I guess they're all on the Epstein tape, so they're probably, let the attention go elsewhere.
You have a 27-year-old male with a 10-year-old girl cross the border, and the Trump administration said, who is that young girl? Because we know the coyotes are trafficking and raping young girls. And then the Democrats go, oh, no, they're separating the daughter from her father. It's like, that's some guy with some kid who is trafficking them. And we know that there's a large amount of rape going on. We need to figure out if these are victims being trafficked. But these liberals, these Democrats, the corporate press, they don't care.
Would you guys support military intervention in Mexico?
What does that mean?
Dropping bombs, targeted assassinations, like total just
If
dedicated
you were going
warfare.
after the
Proportionally, yes.
Yeah, cartels, like, I mean,
In proportional conflict.
is the cartel not an enemy combatant of the United States? Are they not a clear and present danger?
But we have to clarify that. I think military conflict in any country can be justified. It just depends on the context. If, like, Mexico started ritualistically just executing anybody who was near the border, even American citizens, yes, absolutely. If cartels were kidnapping American citizens and then killing them, mark in reprisal. In fact, the Mexican government should be working with us to stop that stuff. And if they don't, then we go after them. For the time being, I don't know if I know enough about the current conflict with the cartels that it justifies bombings and assassinations.
Yeah, I don't
There's
want
also a lot of links to the CIA and intel agencies that helped a lot of cartels out and work with the cartels and are participating in larger drug trades that, of course, are bringing over the fentanyl here into the United States as well. As, of course, they have a history of bringing in crack cocaine and introducing it to, of course, the local populations here as well. So I don't think that's going to happen, Ian, mainly because there's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, it's on the border, which has its own risk. You don't want. I mean, I don't know. I don't think anyone in America wants to be fighting on the border right now, and that could open that up. So you think that they're prioritizing economics over human life, the CIA and whoever's.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's economics for the American public, though. I think it's economics for their own war chests and coffers. I mean, that's probably historically far more accurate than anything that would be positive for American economics. But man, it's hard. I got a call from a buddy this week. He had some friends, and they were in a hunting camp in Sonora, in Mexico, across the border, and cartels grabbed a couple guys, shot a bunch of the guys they were with, and I guess they left some of the Americans. But they are actively doing this. By the way, and they're also taking over all of the law enforcement. They're more heavily armed and weaponized than a lot of the Mexican military. I mean, this is a war zone.
I think, as Luke is pointing out with the intel agencies, I think there's more to it than we realize.
100%.
That these cartels are working with some level of, the U.S. government.
Yeah. But I think that's far more of a threat to the United States than anything going on in the Ukraine right now. I think it's far more relevant to our well-being than anything going on there. But, we're fine sending $150 billion to them without accountability or,
Well, there's a lot of documented cases, especially with Operation Fast and Furious, especially with the Obama administration, especially with even U.S. Special Forces creating essentially one of the fiercest cartels in all of Mexico as well. So the history's there, and this is the public stuff that we know about. What don't we know about? As, of course, almost every step of the way here, we see direct government intervention. You could go all the way back to Iran-Contra. That was another major scandal that the intel agencies were a part of that they were never held responsible for. The guy in charge of it got a spot on Fox News for some freaking reason. And when we don't have accountability for these intel agencies, they're going to continue to do what they did before. So is there a way to get any kind of accountability here from them? That's a question that I think a lot of people have on their minds, especially with how egregiously they've been overacting against your dad.
Listen, I think you got to try, and I think now that there was some nice things about coming in as an outsider, right? But I think there were also some disadvantages, right? Who do you actually trust? The Plum Book, which is, the president's sort of 4,000 employees, they put into those positions. I don't know 4,000 people. You're going to find 4,000 people that are actually going to believe in your movement in this, or, they showed you 3 tweets in the 2 weeks in the hiring process, and, oh yeah, no, we're pretty for it. Now he understands who the snakes are, who the bad people are. And I think that's what scares him more. I think that's why you have sort of the retaliation going so much more aggressively at him, because he is the only threat to their hegemony there. You've seen Nikki Haley. It's like, she was created in a laboratory, by the neocons. It's like the perfect, never-ending war Republican. It's like Liz Cheney.
What do you guys think about Vivek?
Honestly, I like a lot of what he's saying. I do. I've been saying that fairly publicly for quite some time. I say it on my podcast a lot. I guess I'd like to get to know him. I don't actually know him, but I'd like to get to know him. I agree with a lot of what he's saying. On the corollary to that, I have a lot of people, when I'm just doing my live stream or whatever, well, but I don't trust him. I was like, well, I understand that too, because, I don't know where he was in 16, 18, 20, 22. I believe he's certainly, of the other people other than my father on that stage, he's the smartest of them by far. So I also believe he's smart enough to tell you what you want to hear if you're the conservative base voter. But, I kind of want to believe, so maybe it takes some time. I think he's developing. I've always bitched, we have no bench. Right. After Donald Trump, who's the guy, that before the primary, I was like 2 or 3 with DeSantis. I'm like, but like I was a real estate guy until I just started yelling because no one else is fighting, so I might as well do it. We don't have that bench of guys that are going to be rock stars. I think there's some guys coming along, like J.D. Vance. There's other guys that are now coming out, but like, I said it today, John Fetterman is more based than, 3/4 of the United States Senate, like with what he's saying these days. And I'm like, meaning on the Republican side. And how does that happen? So we need more of a base. We need more people who are willing to sort of fight for that America First movement. And, my father gets that now, but, I want to believe. I want to believe that he can get there. I don't know enough yet.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.